A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those for whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, but merciful just as also your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you." The Gospel of the Lord. Again, good morning to all of you. The Gospel passage today, and indeed the feast or memorial of St. Peter Claver that we celebrate today, challenges us. Because the gospel essentially turns the values, the judgments, the reasoning of the world upside down. To love your enemy and pray for your persecutors. To lend even to those who are not going to repay you. To not only, lend your coat, but even your garment, your clothing that you need to wear. But what the Lord is giving us is the concrete application of the law of love. A law of love that sees in the other person a human being beautifully created, unconditionally and incredibly loved by God. To see that in ourselves when we tend to get down on ourselves and judge and condemn and criticize ourselves and develop into this self-pity mode. To see that we are loved, and because we are loved, we can be that much more. We can reach our potential, but we need grace. We need God's Spirit that we can be holy, because that is the call that Jesus is giving us in the gospel. To not judge people, things, circumstances, events, nothing in our life and the life of others, strictly from the perspective of the world, to help others in this fashion. Jesus is saying it's just pure self-interest. It's business. It's not love. It's not charity. It doesn't lead to holiness. Peter Claver lived in a time and in a world in which the black man was considered chattel, property, in which courts and laws judged that they were not indeed human and that they could be used, bought, sold like property, and that in fact it was for their own good because they're so inferior in their thinking, in their whatever, because they didn't even think of genes in those days, genetic makeup. They did that with blacks. They did that with Native Americans and all other native peoples throughout the world, the so-called Christian colonials. And I say so-called because they were really not living up to this gospel. If they had been living up to this gospel, they would never have thought that way. We know now through science that it was absolute hogwash. But it was what was convenient for Christians even to believe so that they could conduct business, so that they could negotiate, barter, and use people as things. The amazing thing is that there have been, praise God, and there are men and women like Peter Claver, whose whole focus was the gospel and God's will, who saw past the racism, past the judgment and thinkings and values of his own time, and saw people in need of care, of protection, in need of hope, in need of gospel good news, that they would not be themselves reduced in mind and spirit to a thing, to a human being loved by God. He would always say, you can say a lot of stuff with your lips, but it's what you do with your hands that will ultimately be on what you will be judged. It is what you do in response to God's commandments, especially that commandment of love. And so he defended, he protected, he cared for, he taught, he preached tirelessly, facing rejection and ridicule from his own, in order that others may come to know the love of Christ, not merely with words, but with deeds. That is the holiness that we're called to in each era, epoch of human existence. Because today, as then, there are all sorts of values, ideas, prejudices, racisms, bigotries, injustices being committed by Christians themselves. We cannot judge others, but we can begin to judge ourselves. Am I living up to this gospel? Am I seeing these as human beings in need of the love of God, expressed not just with lips, but with hands, who care for them, who nurture them, who rush to them in their need, and who show them God's love? May we today and every day respond to this gospel challenge, to live the consequences of God's law of love every day, in every way, with those around us.